The void erupted with light as 300 massive ships tore through space-time, their biomechanical hulls gleaming with malevolent purpose. Against them, 24 ships of the human defense fleet held position near the Proxima Centauri asteroid field. Admiral Sarah Chen watched the enemy armada through the Thermopylae's main viewport, her expression carved from stone. The enemy's transmission came as expected. "Your position is hopeless. Your technology is inferior. Surrender now and we will make your extinction painless." Chen's response was immediate. "This is Admiral Chen of the Human Defense Fleet. We decline your offer." She turned to her crew, a slight smile playing at her lips. "Let's show them why humanity never surrenders." The tactical display told the brutal truth. Their fleet was outnumbered nearly 100 to 1. The enemy capital ships alone dwarfed her entire command, each one large enough to swallow a human cruiser whole. But size wasn't everything. Behind her fleet, 40,000 civilians were still evacuating from the colonies. They needed 3 hours. Chen intended to give them 4. "All ships, combat formation Delta," Chen's voice carried across the command channel, steady and determined. "Cruisers, take point. Destroyer Group 1, prepare for attack pattern Echo 7. She studied the approaching enemy fleet, noting their predictable, arrogant advance. "They think we're inferior? Let's educate them." The enemy commander's voice crackled through the comms again, a hint of confusion in its artificial tone. "You face extinction. Your resistance is illogical. Why do you choose death?" Chen's smile grew sharper. "Because some things are worth dying for, and because you clearly don't know humans very well." She turned to her weapons officer. "All ships, battle stations, show them what the inferior species can do." The Thermopylae's tactical display painted a stark picture of their situation. The human fleet was arranged in a defensive formation: 1 command carrier, 3 heavy cruisers, 8 destroyers, and 12 frigates. 24 ships, 15,000 souls, against an armada that seemed to stretch into infinity. "Status report on the evacuation," Chen commanded, her eyes never leaving the tactical display. "Colony ships are at 38% capacity, Admiral," her XO reported. 40,000 civilians still groundside. Estimated time to completion, 3 hours, 17 minutes. Through the viewport, the enemy fleet's biomechanical ships pulsed with sickly red light, their chitinous hulls reflecting the glow of Proxima Centauri's binary stars. Each of their capital ships carried enough firepower to glass a continent, and they had hundreds. "Lieutenant Santos, what's the status of the Leonidas's railgun capacitors?" "Charged to 100%, Admiral. All 3 heavy cruisers report weapons ready, but—" Santos hesitated. "Their shields could shrug off a dozen direct hits." "Then we'll just have to hit them 13 times, Chen replied, her voice carrying a steel edge. "Destroyer Group 1, move to Grid 7 Alpha, use the asteroid field for cover. Frigate squadrons, prepare for scatter pattern Omega." The crew worked with practiced precision, every person knowing these might be their final hours. But their hands were steady, their voices calm. 15,000 humans against an alien armada, buying time with their lives. Through the comms came the sound of children singing from one of the evacuation ships. Chen's jaw tightened. Those children would live, even if her fleet had to die to the last ship to make it happen. The enemy struck first. Hundreds of energy beams lit up space like artificial lightning, their purple-red glow turning the void into a deadly light show. But Chen had studied their attack patterns for weeks. "All ships, execute random micro-jumps. Pattern Firefly." The human fleet erupted into motion. The Thermopylae blinked in and out of existence, each micro-FTL jump lasting less than a second. Around them, the rest of the fleet performed the same dance, 24 ships becoming ghosts in space. Energy beams sliced through empty void where ships had been milliseconds before. "Cruiser group, execute attack pattern Delta 6, Chen ordered. Target their lead ship's biological components. Railguns, full charge." The 3 human cruisers synchronized their attack. 12 railguns spoke as one, launching tungsten rounds at relativistic speeds. The massive projectiles crossed space in seconds, carrying enough kinetic energy to punch through a small moon. First blood went to humanity. The enemy flagship's chitinous hull split open like a broken egg, its biological components exposed to hard vacuum. The massive ship writhed in space, its bioluminescent patterns flickering chaotically. But the victory was short-lived. "Perseus, break off now!" The warning came too late. The destroyer Perseus, caught between micro-jumps, took a direct hit from 3 enemy beams. For a moment, the ship's outline was perfectly illuminated, its hull glowing white-hot. Then it simply ceased to exist, 300 souls joining the stars in a brief, brilliant flash. "Destroyer Group 2, close ranks." Chen's voice remained steady, though her knuckles were white on the command rail. "Frigate Squadron Alpha, begin attack run on their wounded flagship. Make their victory cost them." The enemy's response was immediate and overwhelming. Their fleet began shifting, breaking into smaller groups, adapting to the human tactics. The bioship's movements became more erratic, less predictable. "Admiral," Santos called out, "they're learning." Chen's expression hardened. "Then we'll just have to teach them something new. All ships, prepare for Operation Sunburn. Let's show them why you don't underestimate humanity." "All ships execute Operation Sunburn." Chen's order sent the human fleet diving toward the binary stars. The enemy followed, their superior numbers spreading out to envelop the human formation. Their biomechanical ships moved with predatory grace, confident in their overwhelming advantage. "Admiral," the science officer reported, "solar activity is reaching critical levels. Primary star showing signs of imminent flare." "Exactly as calculated," Chen smiled. "All ships, radiation shields to maximum. Reroute power from weapons if you have to." The enemy commander's voice crackled through the comms. "Your primitive tactics are futile. Our biomechanical ships are superior in every—" The transmission cut off as the primary star erupted. A massive solar flare, 3 times larger than Earth, burst from the stellar surface. The human ships, their radiation shields straining but holding, rode the wave of stellar fury. The enemy fleet wasn't so fortunate. Their biological components, so superior in normal space, proved catastrophically vulnerable to the intense radiation. Dozens of ships writhed in space as their living hulls literally cooked. Their beautiful bioluminescent patterns turned sickly, then dark. "Now!" Chen ordered. "Destroyer Groups 1 and 2, attack pattern Echo 9, target their damaged ships. Frigate squadrons, scatter and strike." The human fleet struck with surgical precision. Railguns and nuclear torpedoes found easy prey in the radiation-weakened enemy vessels. Each shot struck vulnerable organic tissue, turning mighty bioships into expanding clouds of debris. But the enemy's technological components remained functional. Even as their biological systems failed, their weapons continued firing. Energy beams lashed out randomly, deadly even in their death throes. "Cruiser Spartacus reports critical radiation damage," Santos called out. "Their shields are failing," Chen's voice carried across all channels. "Spartacus, fall back to—" The space around them lit up with new energy signatures. The enemy's reserve fleet had arrived. "Spartacus, get out of there!" Chen's order came too late. The cruiser's radiation shields were already failing, its hull glowing red from the solar assault. But Captain Rodriguez's voice was calm over the comms. "Negative, Admiral. Our reactor's critical, but we can still choose where we die." A pause. "It's been an honor. Spartacus, executing final attack run." The massive cruiser, its hull literally melting, turned directly toward the heart of the enemy's fresh reinforcements. Its engines flared one last time, pushing the dying ship to maximum acceleration. "All hands, abandon ship!" Rodriguez's final command echoed across the frequencies, but everyone knew there wasn't time. The Spartacus, carrying 800 souls, drove straight into the enemy's command ship. The cruiser's failing reactor detonated on impact. The explosion consumed both vessels instantly. The nuclear fireball expanded outward, catching 3 enemy capital ships in its fury. When the light faded, 4 massive bioships had been reduced to scattered atoms. 800 humans died in that moment. They took 12,000 of the enemy with them. Chen checked the chronometer. 2 hours and 40 minutes since the battle began. The evacuation ships needed 20 more minutes. Her fleet was down to 16 ships, but they had done the impossible. They had held. "Status of civilian evacuation?" she asked, her voice tight with controlled emotion. "Final transports launching now, Admiral. 19 minutes to safe jump distance." Chen nodded, watching the enemy regroup. The remaining bioships were moving more cautiously now, having learned respect for inferior human tactics. But there were still too many of them. "All remaining ships," she commanded, "form up on the Thermopylae. We're going to give those evacuation ships every second they need." 4 hours and 13 minutes after the battle began, the last civilian transport jumped to safety. The Thermopylae, now alone, faced the remaining enemy fleet. Her sister ships lay scattered across space, their sacrifice marked by fields of debris and crippled enemy vessels. "This is Admiral Chen to all surviving crew." Her voice was steady, carrying the weight of command one final time. "The civilians are safe. You have fulfilled your duty beyond any reasonable expectation. It has been my highest honor to serve with you." Through the viewport, the enemy ships moved to encircle them. Their biomechanical hulls still pulsed with that sickly red glow, but somehow their movements seemed more cautious now. They had learned to fear human ships, even ones standing alone. "Engineering reports reactor can go critical on command," Santos reported, standing tall at his station. "Weapons are hot. Shields." He managed a grim smile. "Well, they won't matter soon anyway." Chen nodded, her hand resting on the command rail of the ship that had been her home for 15 years. "Plot collision course with their flagship. Let's make our final lesson memorable." The enemy commander's voice crackled through one last time. "You have fought with unexpected effectiveness. Surrender now, and we will study your tactics before eliminating your species." Chen's laugh was genuine. "You still don't understand humans at all, do you? We never surrender. We never stop. And long after we're gone, you'll remember this day. You'll remember how 24 human ships held off an armada, how we proved that spirit matters more than numbers. The Thermopylae's final charge became legend. One ship against hundreds, its weapons blazing defiance into the void until the very end. They say the enemy still speaks of that day, when a handful of human ships cost them dearly for their arrogance. We did not win that battle, but we won something far more important. We won time, we won hope, and we showed the galaxy that humanity never, ever surrenders.